Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we are super happy to have you here, and we just ask that you bring an open mind and heart to your listening experience and to be prepared to explore vantage points that I'm convinced will help shift or solidify your current understanding of the ultimate nature of reality in a way that is extremely empowering. Speaking of exploring powerful perspectives, I would like to gift my book, The Golden Key, Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance to you at goldenkey.gift, where you can get the audio or ebook as my gift to you by using the code POSITIVEHEAD at checkout. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Peter Panagore here with me on the show. Peter is a mystic, minister, and NDE survivor, twice over, I believe, and author of the book, Heaven is Beautiful, How Dying Taught Me That Death is Just the Beginning. Hello there, Peter. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Brandon. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Thanks.
Likewise. You know, I came across you in a unique way, as I just mentioned before we started recording. I was hanging out at my parents' house. My brother is over there a lot. He's obsessed with NDEs. And for anyone who might not know, by the way, that's a near-death experience. And so I just pull up, you know, their Google Chrome or what do they call it? It's not called Google Chrome. I'm going blank on it, but that's their browser. You guys know what I'm talking about. I pulled up their TV through Google, and it had like suggestions, and the first thing was your NDE, and so I just like, I'll click on this, and I was just like, I loved the story. I loved your delivery of the story. It reminded me of a bit of Eben Alexander, who's been on the show a few times, who I imagine you're familiar with. And so, yeah, I just was like, you know what? We haven't ever had anyone go kind of deep down the rabbit hole of their NDE experience. Closest thing, you know, Eben did share some of the details of his many years back. So I was really glad that you were able and willing to come share your wisdom and insights and experiences. And so what I'd like to do is start with my cliche opening question for you, Peter. And it is this. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
I say I died when I was 21 years old, and it changed my life entirely. I became a new person, and I traveled into the light and the oneness of being. And now here I am living a life that I didn't really imagine ever before.
Yeah, another first for this show. That's a great answer. Another first for the show is you're a minister. So that I don't know that we've ever had a minister on the show. And a lot of times you think of that in more traditional religious dogmatic sort of circumstances. But I don't believe everything that I've heard from you that's the case. So yeah, I'd love to. I always want to get as much backstory as relevant for my guest. And in this case, a big part of your story is early on, as you mentioned, at 21, you had a near-death experience. So, and I'd love to hear details of that. So this could be a longer backstory than normal, which is fine. Like I said, your story is so inspiring. So please, just share whatever is relevant leading up to your NDE, and then you can go straight into that, or if you can jump ahead, if you'd like, I'll leave it up to you, and share kind of, here's what the implications were afterwards for me and what I do, and and then we could go back to it. Totally up to you. But please share whatever feels relevant, and in whatever, how chronologically, however you'd like to as well.
Okay. In 1981, I died while ice climbing in British Columbia and Alberta. I had gone on a 10-day snow caving trip into Mount Assiniboine in British Columbia, followed up at the very end by a 1-day ice climb in Alberta in the provincial park on the Icefields Parkway. I was a college student, an exchange student in the National Exchange from my UMass Amherst to Montana State University for the year. I didn't want to go back home to my family for spring break because there was a problem in my family. Many families have problems. We had one. My sister had vanished when I was a kid, run away from home, broke my mom, broke my dad, broke my family. It was a disaster, and I was in Montana to get away. So come spring break, I didn't want to go home. So I had been a Boy Scout and had been winter camping my whole life. I was in the National Ski Patrol, and I was working at Bridger Bowl that year. I had been since I was in high school. So what I mean by that is trained in first aid and a wilderness experience. So I went looking for a partner to go up to those places I looked for a partner to go have an adventure, and he was already going to those places and invited me along. So I went with this guy named Tim, and we spent 8 days snow caving and into Mount Assiniboine. And it was a time where we learned about each other, to trust each other, because we're in the middle of the wilderness.
Yeah.
This is wilderness it's a wilderness inside a wilderness inside a wilderness. It's really like no one was going to come and help us, kind of thing.
Wow. Wow. It's
So,
pretty bold at 21, I might add.
well, yeah, I was that kind of guy. I anyway, we were well prepared though. I had been winter camping since I was 12 years old. I knew what I was getting into, and I was a skier, so we skied in, and I took a class on cross country skiing and telemarking at the university before I left. So I was all tuned up, and I was already a skier. So we spent this great week where we learned to trust each other in a snow cave, in a cabin, uh, all that kind of warm. We were warm the whole time. Then we got out, and Tim, my climbing partner, he had become a certified lead climber in ice. I had never climbed ice. I had climbed quite a bit of rock, but never ice, and been a lot in the mountains.
Yeah, that's no
That
joke.
year,
You probably
that's
saw the documentary recently about, I forget the name of it, Alpine, I think, where
uh
the guy is an ice climber and just like wild, I mean, just fearless.
y- yeah, I
You
actually
have
didn't
some
watch it.
extra
I
perspective on
actually
that.
I didn't I know about I know about it, but I haven't watched it on purpose. Everybody's
Makes
like, "Oh, you must
sense.
have seen
Makes sense.
this." I'm like, "Nah, nah."
You get a
I only
pass.
thank you. I only went ice climbing once in my life, and I died. So I continued
Fair
my
enough.
I continued my adventures, but I gave up climbing too. I did bouldering after. That's, not so different, not so high. And so anyway, um, we went ice climbing, and Tim had been trained as a lead climber, but I, he had all the gear. He was completely rigged out. We used all of his gear except for crampons, boots, and ice axes. And I came up with everything else I needed except for two ice axes. I had one ice axe and an ice hammer. Ice hammer is much shorter. Ice axe is much longer. You can put an ice axe in the ice, and you saw in this film, and you can dangle on it. You get a strap around your wrist, you can rest. But on my other hand, I only had this teensy tiny hammer with a strap on the bottom, so I wouldn't drop it, that I wore around my wrist. But I couldn't set it in the ice and let go. So what that meant was I was expending extra energy more than all the other climbers because I had to grip this hammer for the entire climb of 500 or 600 feet. So we began this ascent, and Tim went up before me, and he was the lead, and I was the cleanup guy, and the climb proceeded, and I was doing it. I'm still really good with being in one singular location. That's what climbing helped me do. It taught me the necessity or the importance of being exactly where you are and paying attention to only what you need to. Because
Hmm.
I'm ADHD, I'm all over the place. So but I'm also able to hyper focus. So I could hyper focus into this, and our climb proceeded at a decent pace, except for our pace was significantly slower than everybody else. I went at a pace that I could go, and I had to rest more. So by the time we reached the top of the climb, the sun set, and the temperature dropped about 30 degrees. And there had been other teams climbing that day, maybe a dozen other teams altogether. And I watched the last guys leave. We reached the top, and I'm looking down at these guys leaving, and I see them looking up, and their body expression, I can tell from this distance that they're like, "What are you doing, man?" Um, and they left, and we're up there. The temperature drops, And we had been building up our fear. Okay, so I was afraid. I knew the situation we were in. So did Tim. We talked about it. We knew that we were I was going too slowly, that I was going to put us in a position where we were going to have to rappel in the dark and the temperature was going to drop. That wasn't a surprise when we got on the top. It was already known. And so when we sat there, uh, Tim hauled up the rope as fast as he could. But in the process of hauling up the rope as fast as he could, it laid down wrong, incorrectly, and so it became a tangle instead. And I'm good at rope, so I took off my gloves and I untangled the knot under the starlight with my gloves off, which was the beginning of my night of fire, the night of fire. The cold feels
Mm.
like fire. And
Wow.
so this is how it began. And immediately what happened to us is the temperature drops 30 degrees when the sun goes down. This is March. There's 10 feet of snow on the ground. And it's really, 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 really beautiful. There are a bazillion stars in the sky of every single color you can imagine, and they're large and they're small, and there's no light pollution. So we can see by starlight. So I untangle this rope and immediately insets violent shivers. And the violent shivers are the compression and the expansion of every muscle in my body, independent of every other muscle, all pulsing at a
Oof.
different rate. So the whole thing's shaking, and my jaw was clattering, and Tim's jaw was clattering. And we knew we were in really serious trouble. We knew that it was death. The first things out of our mouth was, "We're going to die here if we don't do something. How are we going to do this? What are we going to do? We're going to die." So as I haul up, as I untangle the rope, we have this conversation, and he says, or I say, "Should we snuggle up against the rock together and combine our heat?"
Mm-hmm.
And we decided that we had no heat. We're shivering wildly. Then the shivers are trying. It's our body's expression of trying to warm itself, independent of my own decision making. So the body has its own response to this terrible thing. And we realized that we can't do that. The only thing we can do in the starlight is descend. And so we tie ourselves off. Tim takes the front of the line and ties himself, and I step back, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 feet, and I tie a loop around myself so we're connected, and I haul the rest of the rope on my shoulder, and we're also clinking and clattering with carabiners and chocks and pardon me, ice screws, not chocks, ice screws, as they clank behind us on our side. So we make our way across this granite ledge and ice ledge. It's kind of this icy granite place, and we get to the first rappel. And the first rappel is a tree sticking out of the mountain, and we're supposed to take this nylon flat webbing and make a loop and with a square knot and put the rope through it so that the rope doesn't stick to the tree. But we decide that we're two cheap college students. We don't want to spend the money or lose the thing that we might need. So instead, we wrap the rope around the tree and we make our descent down the ice face into an overhang and then onto this other huge ledge. And we are terrified. I am terrified. I know what I'm up against. Tim knows what he's up against. But one of the things that we learned about each other the previous week was in dire situations. We had some high adventures on that ski trip component of our trip, where we learned to trust each other. Plus, you're trusting each other with your life when you're climbing. So
Yeah.
we learned to trust each other, but we also learned part of that trust was level-headedness.
Yeah.
Nobody panics. No panic. No room for panic. Panic will
Right.
kill you.
Yep.
So we're both completely on our game, and we get down to this snow-covered ledge, maybe 4 feet of snow, 3 feet of snow, and now we begin to lose coordination. I've walked in snow my whole life. I know you're out there in California, but out here in the East, I've been what's called post-holing. When the snow is deep, you lift your leg up and you stick it down. You lift your leg up and you stick it down, and that's how you walk through it. Been doing it my whole life. I couldn't do it. I kept
Rough.
falling over, and Tim the same. And he had descended and I descended, and I grabbed the rope to pull it down, and the rope was frozen to the tree, and I, with all my weight, couldn't break it free. Tim came over with our weight combined, couldn't break it free. So he decided, as the responsible lead climber in whose hands our lives were, he decided to reascend the rope, and
Mm.
there was no way to climb back up. And so he tied these two hitches called Persic hitches with these big, huge loops, which are friction. They're based in friction. And when you lift them up, they get loose. And when you pull them down, they have something like 98% or 97% friction adhesion. So he made these two big loops, put his foot and feet inside them. I wrapped the rope around my waist to steady it on the vertical, and he began his ascent, shimmying up this thing. And
Mm.
he got some distance up and he yelled, "Falling!" And I tried to roll out of the way, and he came down and sort of landed on me and landed in the snow. Nobody hurt, but the rope must have got tangled in the loop of the line that he had under his boot, and it pulled the rope down, and the rope was free.
Mm.
And now we're jubilant. We got the rope back again. This took a lot of time. And
Yeah.
tick tock, all of the energy of our bodies is being consumed. No
Yeah.
water, no food, continued cold. Down the highway came a set of lights, pulled into the parking lot. And nobody's on the highway. This is the middle of nowhere. But
Yeah.
the highway's right next to us. The parkway is right there, and the Saskatchewan River's behind it. And it was the warden who we
Mm.
had signed into the wilderness log and not signed out, and he came looking for us.
Wow.
So we jumped up and down, and he flashed his lights. We still have 2 rappels to go, but we now know somebody knows you're here.
Yeah.
So we rope up again and we make this next traverse. All the while, hypothermia continues to advance. All the while, everything starts to burn on fire, fingers and toes and heels and feet and hands and face and ears and nose and eyeballs. My eyeballs, I could feel my eyeballs cold, freezing in my head. And
Mm.
speaking became difficult because our lips were difficult to move when they got like the muscles became too cold to move.
Wow.
So we made this traverse, and in the dark, well, the moon had risen, but it's still dark. We made this traverse so we could see a little bit better into a kind of a corner craggy spot where there was an iron pin and a ring, and Tim put the line through it, and now neither of us are attached. We were attached to each other. We're not attached to anything else. And he makes this descent as our we're trying to both contain our terror as we do this. So it's he makes his rappel and he gets down the ledge, and I found that as every motion that I made, every word that I said drained the energy from me. And so I was up against this how much energy do I have enough energy to get to the bottom before I die? Each step that I make takes energy from me, every motion. So everything that we did, we thought through first, and we were conservative with everything, words, motion, thought. And it was at this point during the night where I had been driving myself along with my willpower that I reached inside my brain to a place I didn't know existed in me, which is way down inside of me. And I tapped into this deep animalistic part of me where it was beneath reason and thought, where inside this deep part of myself, there was this singular survival, just survival. And it wasn't something I was thinking about. Was driving myself towards survival for sure, but the energy that I found inside this place propelled me forward. So
Mm.
I had
Wow.
this extra thing that seemed to me to have always been there, but never had been tapped before. So I make this descent, and I get around the corner onto this ledge where there are iron pins epoxied in with iron rings and carabiners and straps with a carabiner. You can harness yourself in, clip it to your harness. And that's what Tim had done to the left, and I was to the right. And I had the rope, and the end of the rope is called the bitter end in rope terminology. So I took the bitter end, one bitter end, and had to take off my gloves. Okay, so meanwhile, my feet are frozen blocks. My fingers are hard to move. I've got blisters. It's bad. It's bad, bad,
Mm.
bad. And we know that there's this timing thing going on. So I take off my gloves. I put them down. I untie the rope from myself on my rappel and tie it one bitter end to me and take the other bitter end and toss it out around this corner and gave a yank. And in the very first yank of this rope, it wedged inside something that I couldn't see. Must have been laying inside some kind of rock formation, and it jammed. I didn't pull it in couple inches and now it's stuck. And so at this time, the warden flashes his lights and leaves because he thinks that we're safe, and he's
Wow.
gone. And now we're alone again, and the rope is stuck. I've only got half the rope because I've only got one end. So we can't use the rope to reascend as we had done before, and we can't climb back up now ice on the rock. Can't climb back up with the gear that we had in the dark without a rope. So the only choice we had was to pull the rope free, but Tim was far away from me. He was clipped into his own space, and there wasn't enough slack in the line to make that happen. So we decided that it best to remain attached to me so that I didn't drop it and pull as much as I could, which is what I did for a long, long time. And then as I stood there, I kept getting colder and colder and colder, and I lost track of Tim inside my own mind. And at one point, my whole body heated up, my core heated up. That's what it felt like to me, and I started to sweat. And I remember thinking as I felt like all of the blood, the remaining blood was rushing from my extremities into my heart and belly and head and lungs. And I thought, I don't need my feet. I can live without my feet or my hands. But I was hot. And so part of the other thing that happens in hypothermia is irrational choices. We made an irrational choice when we chose not to use the webbing. I made an irrational choice where I unzipped my coat, which often happens with people with hypothermia. So I unzipped my coat to cool myself off. At that point, Tim started yelling at me, zip your coat up, zip your coat up. And I told him basically to forget about it. I'm not. So I left it open, which accelerated my decline. And it came to me at that time, this overflow of peace, of acceptance that I was going to die here, that I can't get out. The rope's super stuck. We can't climb down. Nobody knows we're here. We have, I don't know how much time left, not much. And I had the drive I had to survive abated. And I was left with this acceptance of my situation. And I gave up, struggle. And I remember looking up at the stars and could see the mountain across the way. The bottom is the river, which we could hear all night long. So the Saskatchewan River, as it was flowing all night long, we could hear it flow all night long. And I accepted what was going on, and I started thinking about my parents and that we had a pretty rugged relationship because of all of this. I love them. I loved them then,
Yeah.
but it was pretty rugged, and they were really upset that I didn't come home for that spring break. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to die here, and they're going to lose their son as well as their daughter. And I began to fall asleep. I would fall asleep by like a curtain drop, boom, and I am out cold. And I collapsed and smacked my helmeted head on the granite and jostled and would wake up and stand back up again and pull on the rope. And this repeated over again with the falling asleep with this dark curtain. And I stood back up again. And this time when I stood up, there was a wide black circle on the peripheral of my vision, and I'd never seen it before, and it was really dark. And as I was surprised it was there, I watched it close, and I looked at Tim, and I looked at the mountain, and I looked around, and I watched it just come, and I turned my face to face the mountain, and it went to black. And I thought to myself as it was going to black, I'm gonna fall asleep, but this is weird. I've never seen this before. I don't understand it. And I was still conscious. I was in darkness, but I was conscious.
Wow.
And
Wow.
well, this is the beginning of where I died. And I should stop here. And I've been on this ramble. So do you have anything you want to ask or say?
No. I am just riveted to kind of hear where it goes next, I think you paint the picture so well. So I feel like I'm out on the side of the mountain with you. So
All right,
no, I really, if you're good with continuing, please do.
I will. So I'm in this darkness. Only I don't really understand. I don't understand what's going on because I am conscious, but I have no pain. All of my pain. Cold is like fire. Cold burns. I get to the place where the burning had stopped in my feet. So there was no more fire in my feet, but fire elsewhere.
Mm.
But there was no fire. And I was trying to figure out, well, how I could still be conscious and not feel the pain, not asleep. And as I stared into this darkness at an almost infinite distance, suddenly there was a pinprick of light like a single star in a dark field, but it was
Mm.
a cosmos away. And as soon as it
Wow.
appeared, it rushed toward me faster than the speed of light over this phenomenal distance that I could see the depth of. And it rushed
Wow.
toward me and filled my vision. And as it came to me, very close to me, in an instant, it communicated to me without language, just a download, just information. I'm taking you. And I put up all of this
Mm.
willpower that I had struggled to find inside my animal self that night, and it was nothing. It had no power, no strength at all. And as it reached inside to pull me out, it showed me its intellect. It showed me it's all powerful. I became a rag doll in the grip of Godzilla. No control, and I was inside this entity, and this entity was already known to me because as a child I'd experienced it before a number of times. There are people who are natural born mystics in the world, and I am one of them. And I learned very young to
Mm.
keep my mouth shut about it in my family or anywhere.
Right.
So I was not afraid of this light that came to take me. I just didn't want to go. I didn't understand what was happening. And it took me, and I was inside of it, this intellect, this comfort that's pouring into me, and it carried me back the direction it came from, back to this pinprick of light in this incredible distance away. And I was inside of it, and I had a body of everything I say is metaphor or simile. There's no language. I had no brain, no thoughts, no concepts, no ideas that I can possibly convey inside of language accurately. So a body of light that was no physicality, but I still had a structure similar to my body, my human body, and I was inside this ginormous orb, this its intellect all powerful that was superpositioned. It was also the fullness of the divine. I could see and sense something that I'd seen and sensed before in my childhood, but it was also a portion of it, maybe high the quality of it, but not the quantity of it, in some small sort of
Mm.
compression, but also fully the divine itself. And I was inside of it, and it was pouring comfort into me. I had no will left of my own. I could make no
Mm.
choices. No, I had no agency. I was just inside as it spoke inside of me and surrounded me with that classical comfort of the newly dead person with the little wings and the halo on the cloud of strumming the lyre, ly, right.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so it was sort of like that, only it was reality, and I was severed from my body. And I knew that I was severed from my body because I'd been out of my body before. And this time, no silver cord. Cut. And I was
Mm.
inside this entity, and I could see through it into the darkness, into the void. And I was also outside myself. I had two positions of observation: inside seeing outside, and outside seeing inside. I was somehow non-located outside of this energetic angel, this being of light, which was like a a big, huge orb, and I could see it. I could see myself inside. I could see the angelic being, the being of light, but I had no selfhood. I had no physicality for this point. It's like I was
Mm.
seeing, just an eyeball seeing and understanding, a
Mm-hmm.
seeing of understanding, and also inside at the same time. And then I get carried by this up to this sort of barrier, this edge where things changed, and maybe it unfolded itself, but I popped into this bigger void. This bigger void was also illuminated, but it was darkness. It was darkness, darkness, but at the very far edge of the darkness, darkness was darkness that I couldn't see into, that I knew was infinity, is infinity, that it was still, the infinity was dark to me, but I could see in every direction at once. I was like a gigantic eyeball or 10,000 eyeballs, and my seeing was my being and my thinking and myself. There was no separation like we have eyeball
Mm.
here and finger there. That they were the same thing, and
Yeah.
self inside. And I knew in an instant that I remembered myself. This is
Mm.
me. This has always been me. This is the true me. I was never the human being. I've always been this, that temporary body. And I was content, and I would say unafraid, but that implies that there could have been fear. There was no fear.
Right. Right.
So I'm in this space. I got to take a drink here of water.
Yeah, sure. You've earned it.
Just saying. um, so thank you. Um, so I'm inside. I am this. I am this entity. This no. I'm in no thingness. There are no things there. Where I was not a thing. My light body was
Mhm.
gone. I had the shape of my own consciousness, which was I could describe in energy terms, the a collection of photons, a single photon, something like that. But that is not true. That's a metaphor. I had no substance that is at all what is anything that is here in this world. I was no thing in a place of no thingness. And as I was there
Mm.
in my contentment, and I was alone in this infinity,
Mm.
because even though I couldn't see into infinity, I was also inside the infinity.
Mm.
But the understanding of infinity was beyond my capacity in my soul consciousness self. So I'm inside an an opening, a door, a tearing, a sudden downflow of a waterfall of light suddenly parts the darkness, and it is all of these colors, all the colors of the stars of the sky the night before, oranges and reds and blues, but in every single hue and tone, and a million colors I'd never seen before, light that my human eyes
Wow.
could not perceive. And it was all the spectrum of light, of frequency of light, and it was simultaneously, paradoxically, white light. It was all of these and white at the same time, not one after the
Mm.
other.
Mm.
And there it had a solidity to the surface of it, and it shimmered and it flowed, and I could see the surface of it, and I could see into the depth of it. And all the way deep in was light and color and white. And I could see through it, and on and the transparency of it, there was an entryway, and it was the most compelling I'd ever experienced. I was seductive and desirous, and all I wanted was to experience it. And I moved myself by thought toward it as it came toward me, and I touched it with my being. And as I came close to it, the colors became clearer, the light became brighter, and I touched it with my consciousness. And as I touched it, it opened and flowed into me, and it was all life, capital A, capital L, the all giver of all life. And it was everything that ever was, and it expanded inside of me. And I knew it was next to me
Whew.
and inside of me and surrounding me, all the same, all uh, somehow separate, but all one, and pouring into me, and at the level at which I could not explode with it. And then all these things happened at once. I'm in a place of timelessness. And so to tell the story chronologically is what I do, but it's not true. The truth
Mm.
is that I don't know in what order it happened. If it all
Wow.
happened at the same time. But the
Wow.
first thing that I say tonight is that it knew me. I could hear my name being called, the origin not of my human self, but the origin of my
Mm.
soul self, my eternal self, my everlasting self was called into being, breathed into being, uh, projected from itself, the capital I, the divine self. I was a portion of it. I was named by it. I was created creature in the presence of creator. And I could see myself as eons old, a single photon separated from, but also superpositioned with a Higgs boson field of light energy. Just this huge field of photons that were the same as me, collectively, infinitely greater than me, a singular one. Part of it, yet separate from it, superpositioned in it, not one or the other, both. And I could see that the divine had no, well, I'll come to that part. I'll come to that part, getting ahead of myself. I could see the length of the life of my soul. I could see that I was eons and eons and eons old since the origin of myself, which was always in the now, always being created
Mm.
in the now. So there was this experience of always and just now. And I could see
Mm.
all my other lives. I could see all my incarnations were in front of me, but they were teeny tiny, like if you had a toothpick and you had a big long loaf of French bread and you took 100 toothpicks and you laid them in a stack on either side and didn't come to the middle and they were spaced inches apart, that's
Mm.
what they were like. They were
Mm.
not me. I was this other
Mm.
higher thing, and I saw that they were my lives, and I asked permission to look inside them. And I was shown inside two. And in one, I was a human being. I don't know where I was or what I was, but I was inside a human body, looking out through that person's eyes. I don't know, male or female, and feeling the world with my body and breathing.
Wow.
And I didn't know
Wow.
where I was. And I was taken out and shown another. And in this other, I don't know what I was. I wasn't a human being. I could have been an animal, but I didn't recognize the world because the world looked differently through my eyes. The light that my eyes were seeing through were not human eyes. And the structures I was perceiving weren't anything I was familiar with. I don't know whether I was in another dimension or another universe or on another planet or in an iguana.
Right.
I don't know. Uh,
Right.
so
Wow.
all of this is all happening as I'm hearing my name called. I hear the name of my created self, and I hear it as being pronounced eternally without language, creating me in the now that I am. And in the midst of all of this, there is this still, I have this now experience of all of the pain that I gave away in my human life I have to go through in order to have the more full experience. I didn't know that at the time. All I knew is that
Yeah.
I was suffering all the pain away I gave away in my life, not from like watching it in a movie, but like
Mm.
I was in the person that I had hurt as them. I experienced it
Wow.
like a walk-in. I was inside them, but I was an observer in them. But my observation didn't just include my vision. It included all of my receptors, all of their receptors for all of the chemical rush of anger and or jealousy or sadness or some mix of all of these emotions. And juxtaposed to that, I was also witnessing myself from the inside of my human self for the reasons why I gave them that pain. all of my mix of emotions of jealousy and anger and desire to hurt.
Wow.
And there was this chronology to it from when I was a child, a baby, of all of the pain I gave away, experiencing all of it from 2 points of view, and and seeing with, or hearing with, the ear of my heart, this showing of myself. This was being shown to me. I wasn't I wasn't in control of it. It was being shown to me, and it resulted in shame. I was ashamed of what I had done, because all of the pain I gave away turned out to stick to me. And I understood that all of the pain was mine, and that I had hurt these people very deeply, far more deeply than I ever had thought I had done. And I felt this shame grow inside of me, and I judged myself as guilty, not because I was being judged. I was seeing myself as I was, and feeling their experience as they experienced. There was no judgment here. There was just experience. And I judged myself guilty. And as I judged myself guilty, I was shown all of humanity's radical equality of brokenness, in comparison to the purity with a capital P, and the perfection with a capital P, and the unlimitedness of the divine love that was of perfection, that was so far beyond all of our limited nature as human beings, that it was not my fault that I was a human being. I simply lived a life and made choices, but all of the Catholic kid here, all of the sins that I had committed in my life were of radical equality with everyone else's, including the whole of the universe. It wasn't just humanity I saw. I saw
Wow.
the created order being of a physical structure being less than the perfection of the divine, and us just a portion, a small micron-sized portion of this greater whole of the limitation, and that the limitation itself was necessary for the creation to exist. No limitation,
Mm.
no creation, humanity just part of it. And so as I judged myself, there was this onrush of forgiveness. And as I listened to the love that was given to me in my life, which I carried with me in my heart, and all the love I had given away, which I carried with me, that all became this lens through which my heart could hear the the unspoken voice of the divine inside of me, next to me, and surrounding me, speaking to me. I know you. Nothing is hidden from me. I know you. I show you yourself. I show you yourself in your creation. I show you yourself in your incarnations. I show you yourself in your human Peter life that you just have finished. And I love you because I know you. I love you eternally. And as this love poured into me,
Mm.
all of my pain went away. There was no more attachment to my life, physicality. I was infilled and inflated with beauty, which I summarize all of these words in one word. I summarize it in love, but light, love, beauty, joy, knowledge, everything I wanted to know about the structure of the physical universe, I knew in an instant, and I understood that the rationality, capital R, was beyond my capacity to understand the structure and the knowledge. I understood much of it, but I couldn't plumb the infinite depths of it. It was still darkness to me. But there was so much knowledge, so much reason, so much organization of chaos. There was life and love and beauty and joy and awe and adoration, bliss, paradise, uh, and all of this was redirected the vision of myself. All of this became the center point of my own existence. I no longer existed as I was witness. I had some self enough to know that this was me, but I didn't experience it as a person. It was, and I also knew I was limited. I was still not the totality of the infinity. And then I deflated, and I deflated back to more of my soul self. as I was without the extra juice that was being pumped into me, which left a remainder in me. And as I was there, I remembered my human family and my mom and my dad's brokenness. And I said, I can't come now. I have to go back. And the voice was inviting me, come home, come home. All of the whole void I was inside of was a singular voice speaking very kindly and quietly, whispering, come home, come home. And I say my parents, and I'm swept across heaven. And the heaven is
Mm.
this body of the divine that has no gender and no religion. So far beyond these things, I can't, no physicality, no thingness. I get swept to the edge where there's this like again the Higgs boson field where energy becomes matter, edge of the universe, not the Big Bang,
Mm.
but where
Mm.
matter becomes where energy becomes matter in the universe, and my consciousness is kind of poked out through it, but I'm still 99% inside of the divine, but I can see into our universe in live time. I see our universe, I see all the galaxies. I see to the back to the beginning of our universe, to the origin. I see the origin of our universe, but I don't see just ours. I see universe upon universe upon universe, created, being poured out for eons and eons and eons and layers and layers and layers and depths and depths and
Wow.
depths and wrappings of wrappings. And at the very back of it, there's still infinity in which I cannot see. And attached to all of these universes as they pour out, and I'm still inside ours, and I still can see ours. And as it pours toward me like this huge wave that I experience, that all of these universes and ours included is all made of love, this infinite, eternal, inexplicable, incomprehensible love that is inside everything there is, and this wellness of being. There was wellness and wholeness and the end of all suffering that was forgotten. Suffering was forgotten, and this wellness and love was pervading everything there is and made everything there is exist. The word is panentheism, inside of. And as this poured into me, the voice in surrounding me speaks to me this love and says to me, as I love you now, you now know that I have always loved you. And all of this love was all inside of me. Universe upon universe of layers of love was equally distributed through everything, and particularly inside of me. And then I saw that it was particularly inside of everything. And then my vision was brought to Earth, swept down to our galaxy to see the spiral arms and into the wing side to the planets and our star. And I see Earth, but I was looking in living time, like these people are alive. And I'm seeing Earth as it is inside of time, 7 billion people on this hologram, because I can see through it and I can see all 7 billion peoples at the same time. Not, I don't look at Joe and then I look at
Wow.
Raul. I'm seeing
Yeah.
everybody at once, and they're
Wow.
all doing everything. Half the planet's in nighttime, and then people are sleeping. They're making love. They're having babies. They're at war. They're killing each other. There's terrible things going on, and mundane things, and shopping, and ocean liners, and inside of every single person is this tiny speck of golden light, like a fleck of gold at the very core of their being. And everybody is illuminated by it at the very core of themselves, and nobody can see it because the whole planet is covered with this ethereal foam that is between all human beings. But
Wow.
I know, because I hear inside myself that all is well and has been well and will be well for everything that is made, not just for human beings, but for planets and star systems and galaxies and the universe itself. And the universe is all well. It's always been well. It always will be well in the divine self. And I know now that, well, I see it shows me my parents' faces.
Mm.
And I see my all of my parents' faces and the suffering that they had in their lives, all accumulated in one place. and I see two sets of
Mm.
parents. I see my parents and two parallel timelines. And and in
Wow.
the first timeline, I go home, and in the second timeline, I do not. And I see their lives with me and without me. And I see the multiplication of the suffering that they're going to have. I see the funeral. I see the grieving family. I see them going
Wow.
on without me, and I see my
Wow.
broken parents, and then I see them with me, and I still see brokenness, but I don't see the shattering, but I also see their deaths. I see the end of their lives, and in the end of their lives, there is equality at the end of their lives, and the equality is this gold light itself. That they will enter into the divine as I have entered into it, into this eternal love that
Wow.
is all there is, and welcome in. So all's well that ends well, Shakespeare. All's well that
Mm.
ends well. So you can stay if you
Mm.
wish to, and I withdraw inside the
Wow.
divine again, and I say I was leaving on this theater tour and with the university, and I say I got this commitment, and there's no response for this commitment, like it doesn't really matter all that much, and the voice is still saying you can stay, and I say if I go back, can I come back here to this love, to this understanding, to this wisdom? And the voice says, yes, you come back to us. And I say, I choose to live my life. And like a pebble on a finger, flicked me out off the pebble off the middle finger, flicks me out of heaven.
Wow.
And I shoot away. And it says to me as I go, you won't, I say, I choose to live my life. And it says to me, you won't live your life. And it comes with me as I go. And this angelic
Wow.
reduction of it comes with me and carries me as I get crushed down and condensed. And as I am crushed down and condensed, I'm faced with a choice. And in front of me, there are a million entryways, parallel lives to live in this physical body. They all lead back to my body, but they are all these different lives. And
Wow.
none of them were named. And in the middle of all of these entryways is a singular bolt laser beam of white light flow, which is pouring out from the heaven. And its light illuminates the inner doors and decreasingly to the outer doors. There are millions of these stacked up. And the voice says to me, choose. And it wants me to choose to enter into the beam of light itself. And I think to myself, I want some of myself. I want some selfness. I want some autonomy. I want some creativity. I choose to be a little bit of me, and my choice was made. And in I went a door, still close to the light, but not in the light itself, not in the beam. And I in this tunnel, this leading into my life, I get smaller and smaller and smaller as I go, and I see that all of this tunnel that I'm in is connected to all these other tunnels. There's all these doors between them, and all of the choices that I make are the path that I will walk. And all of them are potentialities, but this particular one, that's my all my probabilities. This is where all of my probabilities lie. This is the path that I am on, that I have chosen. And back I go, and I get outside my body. This angelic form crushes me down like in a car compactor, and painfully twists me into my heart like an ice screw cutting in. And I had no control, and I went from this bliss in a blink to this pain of awakening inside my human form, where suffering had been remembered immediately. And I
Yeah.
regretted, and then my mind, I'm going to
Mm.
stop right there. I can keep going. I'm going to just stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What a journey, and you paint it and share it so eloquently. It really is. Um, it really is inspiring, and I can see. I instantly think as you chose from the doors, it's like, and here we are in the timeline that you chose, right? And so, and those of us listening are somehow a vibrational match, I would imagine, to that particular version of you that door, and there's other us's behind the other doors, perhaps where there is no Peter, and in every possibility in between. Would you agree?
I think that yes, I think that my doors led back to my physical body, but the Peter who was died. I came back.
Yeah.
I came back an entirely different person, an entirely different timeline. And the lives around me, one of the weirdest after gifts of my NDE, which is this thing that keeps on giving, it doesn't stop. One of the weirdest things is that when I came back, nobody knew I was dead. So the first time I saw my parents, I know that I could see the other timeline. I saw their suffering.
Yeah.
They had no
Yeah.
idea. They're no
Yeah. Right.
oblivious to all these to
Well.
multidimensionality.
Wow. Well, so I am curious, logistically, like, just did they end up someone coming to get you off the side of the mountain, or you had to get yourself down?
Yeah, so I'm back in my body, and everything hurts. I'm back in the world of suffering. And as I feel my brain wind up like
Reboot.
I'm back
Yeah.
online. And so
Yeah.
I'm watching this. I'm watching this separate from my body. So
Yeah.
I have this, and that is a thing that has never stopped. I have never
Mm.
stopped observing myself. I am the observer
Mm.
of my life. I'm a witness to myself. And I watched my brain come
Yeah.
back online. I listened to it as it jostled around. I heard my ears open. I felt when they came back, when my ears came back online, that I heard screaming and yelling. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't understand. I didn't have a processor online yet, just receptors. And I'm receiving this noise that sounds terrible. And I start to recognize it as speech, and I hear, "Don't die, don't die,"
Mm.
and my eyes open, and I see an, a being. I'm confused. I don't know who he is or where I am or who I am anymore. I'm confused because I am this other thing. Who is this thing that I'm
Yeah.
in?
Right.
And they're not meshing well. And it was my partner, and he's grabbing me and he's shaking me and he's pulling me up. "You were dead. I thought you were dead. I thought you were dead." And he's crying and he's like uh, blubbering.
Wow.
You were dead, and if you died, I was gonna die. He needed me to live.
Wow. Wow.
And so I'm standing there, and that just came to me. Okay, so I've been through this story 100,000 times in my head, and I never
Hmm.
really understood that he really, really needed me to stay alive. I knew that he would have died, but that's very different from knowing that me there made him live.
Yeah.
So anyway, my presence of mind returned, and I understood where I was and who he was and who I was and what was going on, but I was also witnessing myself. I was bilocated. I was outside myself and inside myself. And I've lived that way ever since. And after a period of time, he said, "Pull the rope," because it was still attached to me. And I pulled the rope, and the rope came free. I fell off the cliff. When I fell asleep, I landed on the cliff. When I fell this time, I rolled off it. I was on the edge of this thing, away from the mountain.
Wow.
And so the rope came free on the first pull, and we were jubilant. And
Wow.
we descended, and the car was right across the street. It was 70 yards away. And Tim wanted, "Let's get in the car and heat ourselves up." We had to go to the car. And it's like, no, we can't do that. We have to set up the tent. We have to heat ourselves up slowly, first aid, hypothermia treatment. So we set up the tent, chimney, vent, because Tim came for a lot of money and had a Arctic tent that we could fire up the stoves inside of and heat the tent as we climbed in our sleeping bags naked and heated up water and sipped, water through warm to hot, from cold to warm to hot, and then ate some food. We saved ourselves. And we stayed there until we defrosted. And I was blistered. My toes were blistered. My fingers were blistered. I still can't feel my big toe on my right foot. ball of my foot, that first knuckle, can't feel that. But I got out with all my digits.
Wow.
And then from that point on, well, the journey, it was, we had, in brief, the warden came back, told us he was coming to see whether he was needed the helicopter to get our bodies. That night on the way home, Tim wouldn't let me drive the car because it was a brand new car because his dad had given it to him. And we had a car wreck. We totaled the car. We spent time in jail. I had to hitchhike back home. I had
That
a stutter.
night?
Oh, that night. It was Tim.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was. And so by the end of this, I was uh, I'll keep talking if that's okay.
Sure.
I can skip this horrific night that followed and go to after effects if you want me to, though.
You know,
Looking at the
good
time, trying
question.
to
I mean,
respect the time.
yeah. It's so interesting. You know what might make sense because there's so many other interesting topics that we discussed before turning the microphone on that we could also talk about. So I wonder if it would make sense to bring you back. You know, find a stopping point if you're up for it. And you know, we talked a little about some of the gospels of Thomas and Mary, and some of those things that I would love to hear your thoughts on. So, you know, maybe you just take it to a point, you know, where you share whatever you still want to share about this experience, and then, you know, we can schedule something in the coming weeks if that will
Sure,
is
that
exciting to you.
sounds exciting to me, Brendan. Um, I- I'll I'll give the thumbnail of what happened. Uh,
Okay.
Tim Tim's dad, wealthy family. I've said it a bunch of times. He's the funder of our trip. I couldn't have gone without the tent and the stove and all this kind of stuff. So
Yep. Yep.
right, so and the climbing gear. But Tim had to drive and he was exhausted. And so we stopped in Calgary and got a piece of pizza, which was this weird experience of having to consume energy, physical energy, to power this robotic biological robot that I was living
Meat
inside
suit.
of, meat suit. It was like totally weird for me. And I was disoriented. And so middle of the night, I fall asleep and we're driving down the highway and I wake up and I see a car in our lane headed toward us. And I say, Tim, you're in the wrong lane. And he's like, no, I'm not. I'm like, yeah, man, you are in the wrong lane. And he's like, oh my God, I am. And swerve over to the right, get back on the right lane. He's like, oh my God, sorry. I must have dozed off there. I said, look, I've been sleeping. I should drive the car. He's like, no, Dad says no. I was like, okay, man, we're cool. We're good. Okay.
Hmm.
So I go back asleep again. And then I wake up to the sound of sirens. And when I open my eyes, there are lights flashing and we're pulling over and it's a Mountie. And I see this house. We're pulled over in front of this house, and this Mountie rolls down the window, and he says, "You guys are speeding," and gives us a ticket. And he says, "Oh, you're Americans. You have to pay your ticket now." And we're like, "We're not paying that ticket now. We'll pay it when we get back." He's like, "No, no, no, no. Either you pay it now, or I'm going to take you in." And we're like, "We're not paying it now." He says, "Get out of the car. You're under arrest."
Wow.
So we're out. We're now in the back of his car, and we're being cruised up to the jail. And now we're locked in the
Jeez.
back of the station. And we're like, we got to pay this fine to get out. We weren't really under arrest. He didn't like book us, but we were held. And we decided we had money in our boots. We lied to him. We had money in our boots, and so we decided to pay the fine in cash. And we did. And they released us, and they brought us back to the car, and off we went. I fall asleep again. I wake up again to headlights in our lane. And I say, Tim, there are headlights in our lane
Jeez.
again. He's like, no, man, there's not. I'm like, yes, there is. And we get in this argument about it. And I had enough. And I grabbed the steering wheel and I yanked it. And as I yanked it, we went off the highway into the gravel. And Tim slams the wheel back to the right and he's screaming. And now we're up on wheels. We're like up off of two wheels. We're like in the air, half in the air. And there's cassette tapes and pens and paper and camping gear and wrappers from granola bars, and all of it's moving in slow motion.
Jeez.
And he's looking at me and he's screaming with his mouth wide open. And the radio was playing. He had jazz. We had jazz tapes, and there's jazz playing, and there's a horn blaring and a loud screeching. And we come across the road, and as we come across the road, right in front of us is the semi headlight. And we kind of cut across in front of it, and Tim hits the wheel, and we go back the other way. We get about almost all the way through, and we kind of catch, and Tim hits the wheel and go back the other way. And there's all this noise, and we're back to the right side of the road, and we're going off the road again, and Tim's back to the left again, and we slam into the rear wheels from the front side of the rear wheels, and boom, and the car is wrecked, and we, and we're bruised and straps, and Tim is still screaming, and there's still this noise, and there's still this screeching, and the crashing, and the horn, and then there's silence, and we're in shock, and then there's a pounding on the window, and it's the truck driver, and he is livid and scared. He's so scared he was going to kill us, and he's mad. And we get out of the car, and Tim kind of gets his madness, and Tim is yelling at me, and this guy's yelling at us, and I got out of the car, and it's completely my fault. And then the Mounties show up, and we have to push the car off the highway, and I cut my hand, and we're bruised and battered, but we're not hurt or broken. And so we can't spend the night on the highway. The car is totaled. We end up spending the night in a hotel. Thumbnail sketch. Tim was so mad at me. And we spent the night on the floor of a hotel for free. And the money we had left, the money I had left, the money he had left, it was enough to buy one bus ticket to Bozeman. And he took our skis and poles and the big gear that we had. And I took our smaller gear, the carabiners and the rope and the screws and that kind of stuff, axe or two. And I made a sign, and I hitchhiked back to Bozeman with a stutter. And I'll stop here. The adventure goes on, but
Whew. That is quite the journey to go through what you went through on the mountain and then have that on top of it. Wow. What you came back to.
I hated coming back. I made
Yeah.
I made a decision that morning with my sign. I didn't decide. I observed that I hated being back and that I had made a mistake. But inside of me, I'm like, take me home. I don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
here. But inside of me, there was this directive, this roaring sound, this waterfall was still in me, still calling me, telling me I belonged to it and I worked for it now. This is my new life.
Mm.
The life you were going to live,
Mm.
you don't get to live it. It's over, done. New timeline.
Mm.
Now it's something different. And I was pretty angry, and the world around me was ugly and flat and black and white and broken. But through the cracks of the fragments, there's still light pouring through. So I could still
Yeah.
see this heaven, but it wasn't where I was. So instead of going into graduate school for architecture, into the family business, I went to divinity school where I studied mysticism, which they didn't teach at Yale, but the dean of students accepted me as a 3-year independent study student.
Mm.
I didn't tell anybody what had happened to me, least of all her, and found money for me to study mysticism. She then talked me into becoming an ordained minister, which is not what I wanted to be. I was going to go on and get my doctorate in mysticism and be a professor. But she talked me into giving it a try. I still love her. I'm still in touch with her. She's in her 90s. She's fabulous. But she
Wow.
talked me into this, and she lives in
And
California.
she was an instructor at Yale.
Yeah, she was one of my deans at in the divinity school at Yale. And
Mm-hmm.
she was the person who interviewed me. And she became a friend, much older than me, a mentor. So, which all leads me to the Gospel of Thomas. So I spent 18 years working in the church as sort of a mystic spy in the
Hmm.
enemy's camp. That's extreme because there were really good people there, okay? But none of them were
Yeah. Yeah.
mystics. None of them, all of them believers, none of them like me. And I kept my
Yeah.
secret to myself, and I dove inside. I studied mysticism. I learned that globally, mystics all go in. They have different techniques of going in, but they all go in and they all use breath and they all use either body or some kind of mantra or some kind of music mantra or some kind of physical
Mm.
process like yoga or Tai
Mm.
Chi or whatever. But they all go in and they all look for the oneness of being. They don't look for anything else. And so I began my journey of my toward my interior quietude, learning to quiet my monkey mind into silence through now 40 years of practice and working with Kriya Yoga that I learned from Pantajali in the Yoga Sutras and Paramahansa. I came back with an extra dose. I came back feeling my chi. I didn't have to go hunt for it. It was there. I could see it around everybody. It was a physical, real thing for me. And I took a yoga class. No, I took a mime class, and Marcel Marceau taught students, and one of his students was my teacher, and yoga was part of the practice. And I found my yoga practice there and combined it with my prana and my chi, or my, anyway. So I
Oh,
spent,
I think this would be a great. Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
oh
I was
no,
going
it's
to say,
cool.
I think this would be great to place to like bookmark and bring you back to just share what that journey has been, what you've learned on your now 40 years later. Um, it's so fascinating because it's obvious, hearing your whole story. It's like, okay, you chose the timeline where you came back to really share this story as eloquently as you do, to do all the study and work. I mean, I didn't even know you had, the whole Yale mysticism thread in your life. So it's just like, such a fascinating journey that you've had, and I definitely want to hear more of it. And I know the listeners probably do too. So let's get something scheduled to hear all the things that you've picked up since the mountain. And I guess before we do sign off, if you would share with people where they can connect or follow your work and that sort of thing for anyone who just can't wait for our next episode.
Thanks for the invitation. Your gracious invitation, and thank you very much. I accept. The PeterPanagore.Love, PeterPanagore.Love. All my links are there. I provide private sessions for suicidality, for grief, for near-death experience integration, for mystical life integration. I went through all of this on my own, and you don't have to anymore. I'm here to help. I got a channel, YouTube channel I do, which is what hopefully we'll talk about next time. I do deconstruction of Christian thinking through the lens of near-death experience. It's called Not Church, working on the Gospel of Thomas these days.
Love that. Not church. I love it. Simple, descriptive, and to the point. Peter, you are amazing, my friend. And, I do have one final question for you as we sign off. And it is my cliche closer. And I think it's particularly interesting to pose to you after what you've been through. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Peter Panagore?
Oh, it's love. That's it. The meaning, love is the treasure of heaven. It's the treasure of earth. It's the treasure you get to carry. You know the story where the guy shows up at the gates with the wheelbarrow full of gold, and St. Peter says, you can't bring that in. Well, you can't bring anything in. Nothing enters in. I went through a purgative fire of divine love that cleansed me of all of the burdens that I had inside myself, that allowed me to enter into this place. And the value of the lens that carried me there was love. It was the love I gave away in my life and the love that was given to me. Love is really, and if there's no one to love in your life, find something to love. A plant, a puppy.
Love that. Thank you, Peter. I fully agree. I always like to say my favorite quote, love is the answer. Now, what is the question? So very, very true. I couldn't agree more. And thank all of you for tuning your beautiful brainwaves and incredible hearts into another episode. We will, I'll be talking with Peter to try and get something on the books sooner than later so that we can continue all his learnings and receive his wisdom. Thanks again, everyone. Thank you, Peter. Till next time. Journey well. Also, before we sign off, I wanted to remind you to download the Golden Key audio or ebook as my free gift to you at goldenkey.gift using the Golden Key code POSITIVEHEAD. And please, if you enjoy my gift, leave a positive review on Amazon so others can find the book and unlock their lives with the help of the Golden Key as well.